going to read just two poems. The first poem is written in acknowledgement of all the people who make all of the things that I pig out on. It occurred to me one day that all the objects that surrounded me in my apartment had been made by people who were not myself. And they sort of felt present to me in a kind of spectral way. And they were like ghosts. And I felt myself, who lived off the handicrafts and the labor of these other people, I felt myself to be something of a kind of vampire. And this poem came from that realization, and it's called The Rumored Existence of Other People. I dreamt my household consisted largely of objects manufactured by people I would never meet or know, and some of these objects dangled down from the ceiling, while others towered dizzily upwards from the floor. If most of them stayed where I left them as if dozing in embryonic thought, still others came with features conducive to movement, making them appear more endearingly alive as they powered up and off in search of excitement. An hour's diversion, no harm in that. Intuition stopped short of determining whether or not any of the objects kept in contact with their makers via some kind of bond, perhaps a physical connection explicable through science, or else a spiritual affinity, notoriously difficult for an outside party to understand. But the more I gave it thought, the more it seemed to me believable. A silver line, a souvenir, a sieve of relation, meaning to release something lovingly means always remaining tied to it. As to be somewhere completely means never having to leave. I thought to figure out how many presences collected around me at that moment. Did they possess consciousness? Would they cooperate? Should I expect a new kind or the mundane damages? Everywhere I might be now in light of where I've been. I dreamt I held out my hand and before long a banana flew up from the industrious parenthesis of Costa Rica and provided for that hand before it knew it wanted. Start slow, be consistent, and your levels will increase. I dreamt the will of manufacturers to produce goods was shed from those goods long after they were made. All the windows overlooking a landfill or production site. The more I gave it thought, the more it seemed to me obvious, also touching. Whoever built that warehouse across the way built it thinking someone would one day look at it in wonder. Also sorrow, to keep an endless store of that feeling, to make, to provide it. That I might turn my back on a building like that will have become unthinkable tomorrow, when my sympathy with most abandoned things is effectively cut from the budget. I dreamt in increments of 3, 5, and eventually 10. Not the way the objects at hand rubbed me, but more the way those beyond me made me pang for them there. I might even say the walls, the floors, the plush carpets unrolled on the floors and the furniture, the refrigerator and any item in it, nautical tchotchkes and the curtains clamped tight as August cawhogs to optimize my output. The shedding of the will, too, takes place incrementally, across decades, late at night, the little shifting in a room's air profile comparable to a ghost's entrance, if not quite equivalent. At work beyond the warehouse, everything else. Droplets on navy felt, protection sensed in a system whose products had begun to forecast accurate wants. I dreamt of bodies' indentation beside me on the mattress, vanishing as the presence found the door through a film adaptation of silence. Child with gifts for ravens in pockets, lady affianced to alien abduction, figure of the human experiment almost over. I opened my mouth and in no time lasagna, Chianti, a greater than expected rate of melting, atrophy, military action, and a ravenousness that shook my confidence in the hinged box I keep pin money in. The rumble of it recalls the convulsion Plato says the gods sank Atlantis with to chasten its inhabitants, whose vast majority descended from Poseidon and one of the island's earthborn shepherdesses. As long as divinity remained predominant in their nature, Atlanteans kept obedient to the laws of their progenitor. But over time, what was divine diminished, and love of wisdom and virtue gave way to love of wealth and luxury, which in the past had seemed merely distractions. To those who lacked the ability to see through the radiance of things, the Atlanteans appeared to be thriving. Palaces, baths, mines rich in orichalcum, herds of elephants, vineyards, orchards, access to upwards of a dozen sherbets, the chance to astonish house guests with golden oblongs and lozenges, to watch as vampires turned mortals into vampires for cash, despite the fact that vampires could easily devise a life without having to dirty their pale hands with money again. But apparently, nothing restores that old vitality like a night of spending. I dreamt a percentage of my money had been touched by entrepreneurs of the undead. I dreamt I'd never guess how much. Dreamt no idea where my money had been, what bathroom floor or choir stole or alp or what disgrace. Dreamt I couldn't taste a difference. Dreamt my money might want company, and I had better not keep putting it in my mouth in that case. As drawing from a songbird's coloratura, I dreamt the secret to prosperity is being commonesque. Profiteroles, remote control, the ruin of my body. And tremulous as horses hidden in old plaster, confused as vinyl siding, certain as what's happening can't have all at once, or even all that fast, but by degrees imperceptible until too late, eyes trained to other tasks as the sheep took to clover, distracted as a vortex of plastic debris measuring twice the size of Texas patched itself together mid-Pacific, a swirl like a god's intoxicated eye, but not surveillant, voyeuristic, a bright new continent only in it for the kicks, its culture to bask, its historiography accidental, with every bit of flotsam serving as a double record of one product's manufacture and consumption. I dreamt in complex packaging that posed no less a threat at the factory warehouse than up among my cupboards, or dropped in the superabundant trash bins at airports. Found it simple and good to forget that threat, by letting perception of such objects eclipse true knowledge of them. Any worry washed in umbra, like being in the moment only endlessly. I hear the naked hands of strangers make my dumplings, but experience insists what makes them mine is money. I open the door and I extend good money into ancient night, night prosperous with stars, order heavy in my hand. I'm immortal that way. I lie down and I feed. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll read one more. And this poem was written in acknowledgement of a little plant. A plant that's somewhere between a moss and a fern, known as a fern ally. I think it must help the ferns out. And it grew behind my house growing up, in the woods behind my house when I was growing up. And I used to love playing with this particular kind of spongy little pine-looking kind of plant. And I would pretend they were little pine trees and I was a kind of giant to them. And we all did, though. This wasn't me and my ego. This was a shared experience. And in any case, that land disappeared as I grew older. And I go back to my parents' house now, and it's all of this particular plant, this club moss is what it's called, or Lycopodium obscurum, and it's binomial. It disappeared. And I found out later that it disappeared because my parents sold all the land behind our house in order to pay for my college education. Oh. Yeah, I know. So this is called, I don't know, I'm ambivalent. Just about this, right? Not about other things. But this is called, it's called Lycopodium obscurum in honor of that plant. And it's a new poem, it's not in the book. If it's true that a person has to become more than half dead to this world to live in it happily, then I'll be happy never to live in it happily again. Let the phenomena alternately capsize and crank me up into the Atlantic air. I will hang there jangling till the point of view turns out to be born on the concave back of some far too faulty conception of happiness, which is to say, just say the word and I'll tear it down and get back to work. Here in my dirt laboratory, here where I take my time and have it, what shatters on the workbench wends its way to the floor in light-feathered sentences whose truth content amounts to as much as the average rainfall between syllables in silver. Sentences that chirp insights back and forth nights like peckish metaphysicists united over pastry, an altarpiece of it, baroque in an effort to avoid further scrutiny of the universal diagram for the formation of questions regarding every possible proposition. Having only recently tattooed it to the top backs of truffle hogs, we then released into the autumn of their abutting acreage to no avail. I can't fault them. They can't be faulted. Not entirely. Not when the need to articulate their quest in material terms animates limbs no less than hungers of the body. But something keeps going wrong, something that calls for cold, long walks through quiet acreage, a chance to glimpse, as in time-lapse photography, the pert tassels of what's classified as a fern ally insist through the topsoil. I never knew its binomial till long after the woods in which it grew got axed to pay for my tutorials. We ranch house-style houses fortify that land now, habitats where lives like mine go drab between lasagna and last month's crossword puzzles. Dust descends on candy dishes. Radon detectors blink plainly in the basements. The sentences want to know how much of what they perceive is actually a message. Sorry, I stand corrected. What they really want to know is how much of what they perceive is actually a pastry. Pretty much all of it, I say. After so many failed strivings into darkness, into ether, they've come to value most what they can lay their hands on, place inside their mouth. All that animus spent hunting the intrinsic instead of honing methods to evaluate the relative wore them out. Go to bed, little sentences. The ghosts of club moss rise up because I felt them here. I tend to them this way, a member of their movement. And maybe what erupts calls for that, for less grid work and more choreography, for form including time, change, and not just setting into fixed position, although back in the day the sentences would have wagered all dance had grid work hidden in it. Tonight I'll board the ship with caution because it is too dark now not to. Hands on the rope rail, eyes on my feet up the gangplank and back against the stars beneath which happiness will be thought the motion of a mind whereby a value is performed. Like a show of respect for the forest that startles us into feeling at home being lost in it, insofar as this position can only be borne on the back of a somewhat loose conception of feeling. I am starting a new way to feel.